Hello. This talk, I would like to talk about this thing called Pkf Files. And for most people, it doesn't give sense. And if you Google this kind of files, it will actually match with some Adobe files, which is not the case. But this is like a So this is just a hobby project that I did in order to make a tribute to Michael Robinson, who was a TV personality from Spain, and also like the PC football community, which he helped build up. So he recently died of a cancer, and this is, like I say, this is the reason I made this project. So about what I'm going to show in the next minutes, I will talk a little bit about myself. I will give a bit more detail than just being this tribute to Michael Robinson. I will talk about the tooling that I actually created, PCX utils, and I will talk a bit about before and after what happened when I went public with the code, and I will then show a short demo. So I'm a mixture of a Danish and a Spanish marriage, so this is why I have a combination of Spanish and Danish name surnames. I have a theoretical degree in computer science and mathematics, and on a daily basis I work mostly with EU GDPR stuff and Haskell and PureScript. I like a lot open sourceness, and also this project is released under a copyleft license, which is made by the Free Software Foundation. And I have a meetup for functional Copenhageners in Copenhagen, which is also one of my passions. So what I would like to show with this talk is sometimes when we tackle this kind of task where we try to find patterns or stuff inside data containers that we actually don't know what they're all about, sometimes we forget there are actually some tools that have some really nice concept or constructs that can help us with some simplicity, structure, and correctness by doing some kind of testing. And I will try to show and convince you that this is the case. This is why, by using this tool, I actually got a lot done, and almost for free. So I have spoken with some people that I have met here at BornHack, and most people say, you're a bit crazy. Why the heck do you just stare into some bytes? Use some kind of debug or disassembler to get those kind of information. And for me, it was just like doing some kind of reverse puzzle. So I just wanted to see if I can deconstruct this data container information. So I'm just been sitting in an Emacs with a hexel mode, and of course you get a lot of what the fuck moments. So, and it's important to notice that even though I had knowledge of the game itself, I didn't have any knowledge whatsoever about this kind of data container. And I will be showing some code, but hopefully it's close enough to English so most people will be able to understand it, even though they don't code on a daily basis. So about this background, and like 2 years ago, like it was this 25th anniversary of this football game, or this PC games that almost got released at the same time as Windows 95 and Intel Pentiums. And it's mostly a football manager, which was simple enough and complex enough for many Spaniards people to play with it on the PCs. And if you know about Spanish people, they're actually very passionate about football, so it was just like almost a match made in heaven. So those two brothers, whenever I put out the slides, there's some interviews in Spanish where you can see how it was, how did they created all this stuff. So one of the nice things for myself is I'm a Linux user, so thanks to Wine, I was actually able to install this old school PC game on my Linux, and I can actually play the game again. Then I actually discovered that it exists like a community. And this community has for the last 25 years tried to keep this games up to date with the newest players that plays for these teams, and also update the teams on this game. But what I noticed is that most of this community helpers, they were actually doing this from a hexadecimal editor, so they were just converting with calculators to find out what the representation of a string is, and then they just update the information directly as bytes. And it's a very tedious and manual, and it's not error-prone, or it's well, you can get a lot of errors. So it's like, I thought to myself, well, we might be able to do this better, right? So 400 teams, and I think they say that it takes one man-day per team, so it's like 480 days to update these teams, right? So that's almost a year. Of course, they distribute it out to other people, and they can do it faster. So one of the things they made this such a genius move, and I have it at the bottom, is that they found a loophole, hackers. So instead of selling the game, the PC game, as a PC game where you have to pay a higher VAT, they found out they can actually sell it as a magazine with a game. So the magazines in Spain, you'd have to pay less VAT, and because the price was lesser, more people can buy the game. And this is one of the reasons, besides it was a good game, that it got so popular. So this is more or less what I had in mind that I wanted to do. So main goal for myself was to automate as much as possible with regard of this updating the data in the game, right? I already had like some notions of Electronic Arts. They had this online database where you can just log in and get all kind of information from all these football players. And it's free, and you didn't need to do any registration, which is kind of cool because I don't want them to know that I'm actually doing this stuff. Sadly, like 1 or 2 years ago, the guys from Electronic Arts decided they didn't want to update this API anymore. So if you want legacy data, when I put out the slide, you can just click on that, and you can actually retrieve the data as it looked like 2 years ago. It's still active, but they just don't update it. Then I found another alternative, which is more or less reusing the data from this API. And this is actually the one that I use to do this game. But what I notice is that not all data is actually populated to this API. And I know it because the data is in the Electronic Arts, but it's not in the other one. And I might think this had to do with some kind of business model. So if you want all the data, you had to pay for it. Other goals is that I really want this to be an open project. So copyleft license. Whenever this was done, I was just going to put it out. People can make new spawns of this project. They can take the code, they can modify it, and they can make the community better, right? So, and finally, I also wanted people without any kind of knowledge in programming. They should be able to update data. Maybe there's some areas in any of those APIs. So maybe end users, let's say that you can do 90 or 95% automatically, and then you just need to do the 5% manually. So several versions of this game, and I have the main focus on the 6.0 because for me, or for many other people, it's like just the best one of those games. But hopefully with the code out there, some people can take it and get inspired to make for the 5.0 or the 7.0. So what is this Pkf Files, everybody asking? Like I say, if you Google for it, it's going to appear like it was some kind of Adobe data format. And Pkf is just this data containers for both PC football and PC basket, where they just store all this kind of data. So what I discover, like at the end, not at the beginning, is that the Pkf files have some sets of 32 pointers, and those 32 pointers point to some data which can be related to a team or can be related to some kind of players and so on and so forth, right? So at the beginning I didn't know this one, so I was more or less like just guessing. And as I mentioned, this is what I saw initially. I just started up Emacs. I just took this Pkf file as you see here, and this is just what you can see. So you go down and so on and so forth. Oh, and then you can see here like a copyright notice. So initially I found out that there's like 484 copyright notices, and I knew there was 484 teams in the game, so I was just like, that might be something, right? So what I did, I was just like chunking the file and taking from here the copyright notice until the next copyright notice, and then I knew, well, that has to be a team. The problem with this approach is, even though I got some information from these teams, I got a lot of errors. And this is just like, there was like just guessing, because I had no absolute no clue. I didn't know this. I didn't know this yet. I didn't know there was some kind of pointers here. So this was my first approach, just take Emacs, put it in hexel mode, and just try to look into the bytes. Of course, with my parser, and to the people who are not familiar with parsers, a parser is just when we try to analyze like a sequence of bytes or chars or whatever it is, and we try to like conform that into like a set of rules and then place it into an AST. An AST is an abstract syntax tree, which is just like what can you say, some kind of data structure where you're able to put in like data that you get out of this sequence of bytes or chars. So then I actually understood, because I went back into looking into all these bytes, and what I noticed is there's like this repeating pattern here, right? 1 TA, Italy, 1 TA, 1 TA, and it's more or less the same. So what I did is I just took chunks of this information and I began to put it together, and then I was like, whoa, there's 32. 32 is normally a number which is 2 to the power, I think it's 5, if I don't remember incorrectly. But what I began to discover is that there was some kind of information in these values here. So it was starting here as 0, 2, and so on and so forth. And what I discovered in these pointers is actually that there was this information about, where is it? Yeah. So you had like, so in this pointers you had like a unique identifier, which is like the unique identifier for each team. Then you had like the offset from the beginning of the file, and then you have like the size of the data chunks, as I was mentioning before. So this made it even easier, because once I noticed that, okay, so there are some pointers, right? And the pointers have some data chunks at the end, there's some kind of point terminator, some empty bytes, and then just the last data. So once I realized that, I only had 3 errors when I was running my parser. And I discovered that there might be some, what can you say, some intended bugs. So if people try to extract information, as I do, you cannot just do it with one single pattern. So this is one of the good things about having these tools with parser combinators, that you can just choose something called alternatives, so you can define several patterns that it can actually look for, and can do some backtracking, going back and try some other cases. And my final approach was that I was trying to instantiate those unique IDs from these Pkf files while I was parsing, and that might be a wrong approach, because this unique identifiers, it was not the same approach for all the Pkf files. So what I did is I just do that on a later when I need to. When I need the unique identifiers for specific Pkfs, I will just use it in that sense. So another thing that I noticed is that all the text except this information this copyright notice from Dynamics Multimedia. So except that, that's the only understandable text that there are in this file. But there was this rotation file that I found in one of the other projects' code, and I actually noticed that they had like 2 to encode or decode, but I soon realized it was just a rotation. So my function, if you rotate and rotate the bytes, you get the bytes back. So when I did that and I noticed that, I say, I might be onto something, right? So one of the things is, once you have the data in this AST, this abstract syntax tree, har I mulighed for at slukke det lys? Det gør lidt ondt i øjnene. So once you have this data, once you have parsed it correctly in the different branches in the different intended box, the next step is, well, we want to have it in this nice way of seeing it in the AST, but we also want to be able to recreate this binaries once again. So what I noticed is that Dynamics Multimedia, instead of making this big file every time they had some kind of changes to the data, they just made these delta files called DBCs. So once I realized that a DBC is just one of these chunks without the pointers. So this is well, one of these ones, oh, it's just easier to do this. One of these single teams is just a DBC in itself, but you just need to ensure that it doesn't have the pointer. And you need to make like some bit change, so it actually notice that it's like a DBC file and it's just 2 bytes changed that you need to do that. So this is also one of the other constructs that I really happy that I can use because I use this kind of tool. Is I just need to like define for each of my data types, and this is just the basic data types. So Boolean, word 8, word 16, word 32, and strings. I just actually just define that my byte stream that I want to get out of this data, I can just define it as by implementing this function called bytes. And the good thing about this is afterwards you can just do recursively. So as long as you keep concatenating all this sub data types from your data, it will do it in a nice and easily and readable way afterwards. So here is this, maybe it's a bit like the complex one is the string, and I think it's a bit too small, but hey, it's a picture, sorry, I cannot make it any bigger. So the way I do with strings is I just store the information of the length of the string in a word 16, and then I just take all the bytes and I just rotate it as I showed before, but I only do it once. So this way, when it gets into the game, it automatically gets to rotate it back in, and then it's like a readable text from the game. Just going to take another slurp of water. So yes, as I at the beginning I tried to mimic or recreate this big Pkf file with all this information, and once I updated it, I needed also to update the pointers offset and also like the sizes. So this is why I decided, well, why not just stay with the DBC? And also one of the good things is that some of these teams have some extra information which is not relevant anymore. Like you have to understand that this game was popular back in the days where like the internet was not very popular, so there was a lot of data that people didn't have access to. So in order to generate this small DBCs, I just remove all that stuff because I distributed this update of data through like a service. So I'm really interested in having as small DBCs as possible. And as I mentioned, you only need to ensure that it's a DBC file just by changing 2 bytes. It's as simple as that. So now I'm actually able to take the data files. I can extract the data in something that's readable for human people. We can make the changes, and now I can make the delta files. And when I take the delta files, they can be read by the game. So already I have the mechanism to update data, but it's still a manual process. So now we have to do this manually. So the next step would be is just to go this API called FootBest. And there was a lot of JSON data that gets downloaded, or this service actually provides you with a lot of JSON. So what I did is just as the workshop that Simon Shine had the other day, is just use this tool called JCube, which is pretty fast. It's written in C, and it just has the necessary like possibilities to resharp your data from a bash or from a terminal or a bash script. Also, like, I use a lot of curl and vget to get all this PNG files afterwards. Because like data is like data information of the players and the teams is stored in a JSON format, but like the pictures of the players is stored in PNG files. So one of the things that you notice is that they have like this unique setup for the images, and it's, of course, they try to obfuscate the text, but they also try to obfuscate like the colors. So this is why I made the logo of this project like the color palette from Dynamics Multimedia. And this is something that I extracted, and while I was searching for this, there was like a very similar question with regard more or less the same that I was doing on the Image Magic forum. So I was just like, maybe somebody else did this a few years ago. So I have like a script that is able to generate this BMP file, and I also have to make another tool that transformed the bitmap as it is. Maybe it's 4 or 5, but it will take it back to the version 3, which is the one that they use in the community. And you have to understand what they do. They take like a picture of a player from a website, they put it into the measurement they need for the game, and then and it's important, they need to use this tool called Paint from Windows XP, and it has to be a Paint from Windows XP. So they have like a, what is it? No, it's not a Docker, but it's like some kind of a virtual environment where they can run this tool. So also because I need to distribute this afterwards, like I can see that it's storing all the bytes or all the pixels as 4 bytes. And I can see that the alpha layer is never used by the BMPs. So I thought, well, I already understood the BMP specification. I was using Microsoft's website, which was a pretty good, well-documented way of describing this BMP. So it's just so, well, why not use like the version 2 where we only have 3 bytes per color? So we're not using alpha. So I might be able to save 260 bytes, because you have to understand that it's just like the index of the colors, and then you have just a pointer to each index. So I was able to reduce per picture 256 bytes, and you might say, well, that's not a lot. But when you make 10,000 images, that's actually quite some bytes that you actually save. And once you have both the DBC files and you have the image files in a smaller size, well, I don't want to use too much of Tyglin's service, so at the moment it's 13 megabytes, and I just push it up to hostfile.it, and you can get the latest version. And like I say, I probably owe Tyglin an alcohol tsunami afterwards, because it's a free service and I am allowed to host my update of the data from his service. So a month ago, I gave this talk, but it was more focused on a demo, because I wanted to show this for the community, because I expect those people to be the ones that are going to use this tool. So I gave this talk in Spanish, and it was like a pretty long one, 3 hours, and it was very deep dive into code. And because it's limited the time here in BornHack, I tried to abstract it a bit more, because not everybody here codes. So this is when I took the code as it was, and I put it public onto GitLab. I just made it from private to public. And what is the thing that happened? So main goal, automate as much as possible. I think that downloading all the images and all the data and running the script to update, it will take like maybe half an hour compared to 480 hours to update, or days to update all the teams, which is, I would say, it's a pretty good factor, reduce. The thing about this API, which is like its legacy, what I noticed is as soon as this got out, this API I was using disappeared in like 1 week. So maybe a lot of people tried this out, and the person or the company hosting this API just decided, well, I don't want to pay all this money to all these people downloading all this stuff, so it just disappeared. So that means that a lot of the job I did parsing this API with JQ and so on, it's totally useless now. So until I find another API where I can do this, well, the project is a bit dead, but at least I have all the data locally. One of the other goals was for me to put this out as an open source project, and hopefully people will be able to use this. And I got one of my friends to actually commit code with regard of some abstraction that I was not bright enough to do myself, and he did it in a very simple way. One of the thing is, so you can see I'm one of those guys who actually sit in a terminal, right? As many of us here are hackers, we are happy with our Linux and our terminals, and I don't need a user interface if I can avoid it, right? But when you go to like people that don't code and people that are used to use hexadecimal editors, they want some kind of UI so they can actually be used or utilize this as a way to, as they used, right? But I think it's like impossible task to make a nice user interface that is cross-platform, that will work on Linux, Mac, and Windows. So this is why I don't think that will be a goal for me. Also, I will also find it a bit difficult to put the effort into like a user interface because how will I script it? The whole point of me doing this is that we need to update as much as possible, so we can get like, let's say 95% is getting updated by this script and code. Well, the last 5%, well, we should probably use the effort in some kind of a editor. And the problem I see it right now is that when I store all this information, I store it in a big file, and that file, it's like 30 megabytes, and it's a bit too difficult to work around with. So I'm trying to maybe make it smaller. So each team has a folder with its players, and then you can just copy the player from one folder to the other folder if you want to move him from one team to another. But again, this is just open for discussion. So for my main goals, I got something good, and I got more or less two wrong because the API disappeared, and using like a terminal editor or Emacs or whatever this is not what most people expect to use when you work with stuff like this. So it was not all too badish. So I had two threads on this forum, as I mentioned in the abstract. And if you just sort by punctuation, like rating, there's only two threads on that subforum that has 5 stars. And I know we're in Denmark, you're not supposed to brag about yourself, but I just thought it was kind of funny. But it's like, so if anybody understands Spanish, or just put them through Google Translate, and you can actually see how the question I was asking at the beginning was just like totally noob question, because I had no clue whatsoever what I was doing. And then after looking into these bytes for many months and just realizing what all this information was, it was just like, you can see how I become more and more clever. Oh, this is what happened, and just sharing with other people, right? So this is what I wanted to do, because maybe in 1 year, maybe in 2 months, maybe in 2 weeks, I'm not going to play with this game again, but maybe somebody else is going to do it. And also, like, I got like I think it was a thumbs up on my profile. It was say, this what I do is one of the best thing that happened for editing this data in many years. Again, don't brag in Denmark. It's not what you do is this jantelov, right? I'm going to take a bit more water. So one of the things that was a bit, and I can say Troels and maybe Simon can recognize like the GitHub logo at the top right. So one of the things that that differs a bit from this old school game and the FIFA API is that there is like, see how many parameters they use to calculate that average, right? In the PC football, you only have 3. So what I wanted to do is I really want to have that average, like 93, but I wanted to be able to recreate it with those exact values. So this is like the simplistic, just like the overall information that Sebastian made for this algorithm. But what you could do is like you get some kind of uniform distribution of all the values, so you don't have too long gaps. So if this 93, it will not go to maybe 53 when it goes over. It will always be maybe 94 or 92 or 91. So we ensure that we still get like the same average rating, but we don't make those values in the game too separated from what they really are, right? And I don't know, not many people here likes football, but after yesterday, they might have to remove the rating of this player. So put it lower. But it was kind of nice, and sometimes you have your own network, people that just see stuff clearly. So once code go online, they just have open possibilities to see how it is and might be able to say, well, why don't you try this? I mean, the way I was doing it, I was actually getting some kind of overflow in the values. It's because they store this information in the game as a byte. So they have like this built-in soft mechanism to ensure that you never get above 99 in the code. But what if in the data byte just put 255, right? So I tried to do that for all the parameters in the game, and I think it was like the player was very costly, and it has like an insane salary. So the game more or less understand it with the logic, but there was some players, like the young players, that it actually got like buggy, and the game at some point crashed. So at least this algorithm that Sebastian did was pretty cool. Afterwards, so what you need to understand is that this is a game from 1997. So when you take the news data and you update it, some of the players are actually not even born in that year, right? So, well, let's say they are born in 2001. So they will actually have some minus age, but the thing is, it's not represented in the game as integers. It doesn't give sense to have minus 12 years old, right? So what it was, I think it was a word 32, and some of the players had like 3 billion years or something like that. It couldn't even fit in the screen. So it was kind of funny. So I didn't want to take any kind of changes to the manager because I didn't want to distribute the binary itself. But what I ended up doing is in this PCX utils, I just made some extra tooling that can patch the original binary file, and it will actually update it. And I really had like this problem because for me, like I was just thinking, well, the game was from 1997. So what if I just moved 1997 to 2019, right? I didn't know that it was actually a calendar. So you have to put 1997 to 2019 and then 1998 to 2020. So I was only updating the first value. So I had like a strange calendar that was going from 2019 to 1998. Of course, after a few clicks on the mouse, everything just crashed, right? Another of the ones that I got to patch was this, and this was the problematic one because there were some players that were born in 2002. And the game had this internal mechanism that actually says everything before 1900, I just randomize the birthday of the players. Everything after 2000, I just randomized the birthday of the players. So you had young players that were actually older than the older players, which is a bit like, But I knew because I've been updating the values, and I actually knew I could put it down to 900 to 2000. And by the power of Emacs, I just made one search. Could you please make, with regular expression, I was just saying, please look for the hexadecimal values of 1900 and 2000. I knew there was some kind of if logic there that says if it's less than this or greater than this, you have to call the randomize function. That was pretty obvious. And when I run this greedy version where I was just trying to ensure that those two hex values was as close as possible, there was only one place in this binary file, right? So I just changed it to those values and whooped it just worked. So initially I just put it into 0 instead of 1. But what I realized is that when they didn't know the birthday of some player, because this is 1997 and they didn't have access to the internet, they put like this age of 1900, so they can get a randomized number, and I think the range is between 25 and maybe 29, right? But what happened is that then I had players in the game that was born in 1900, and it was 2019, so they were pretty old. So I had like players 120 years old playing the game, which was a bit like not pretty good. So that's why I leave like this to 1, and then I go update all the data and I just put it to 0. So I don't know, the problem with Xmonad, and last time I played this more seriously, I was using cubes, which comes with XFCE, that has built into this what's called the manager, the Windows manager. So they had this built-in zoom, so I can just mark like a spot of my screen and it can zoom it out. So maybe if you see it like this, it's too small to see, right? So they had like all this stuff. So I just want to show like this is a friendly match, and this is Spanish, so you probably don't understand it unless you speak the language, but you can see here are 2 teams. So if I just take them, and I go into the, so you can see we're still in 1997. This is pretty, maybe too small for you, but hey, it says 1997. This is when the game was released. And if we look into here, we can see that the goalkeeper, he was 28 years, right? So let's start up the binary where we patched it. Wine, and then it's just, this is one of the good things about using Linux, is because manager with all lowercase is just another file on the system. But if this was in a Linux, you will just overwrite the manager with all uppercases. So I can still keep the original manager file, but I can just make my own, which is the patch one. So if we go in again. So he was 28 years, right? So now we can see we are in 2019. And of course, like the player, he has to be a bit older. And now we can see he's 50, which is more or less what I would expect. So now we would like to get like data from this service. And I have all the data local because like this data doesn't exist anymore online. And I don't think we will look into this one anymore. Food all. So what I did is I just wrapped all this different leagues based on this tooling. So I just say, let's, for the sake of it, just make for the Spanish first division. We can run the script. And it should be maybe a few minutes. So what I do is I, based on the JSON with JQ, I use this raw format to create my own representation of the abstract syntax tree. And this information afterwards I put it into my applications, and there I can transform it with the thing I showed before, the type classes, where I can make the byte string with the bytes for each of these data representations. So this is all everything I'm doing. So extracting the JSON format for the teams and the players, I merge them together. So the players goes under the team. I convert them into this delta for each team. I transform the images. I ensure they actually BMP2. I ensure they actually live up to, and I would also like to show like how are the pictures very good quality now because it's 2020 compared to the small size that we need in this game. So I think it takes a few minutes, but shouldn't be fast enough. I can take a slow. So while this is working a bit, I had like so in order to do this project, I needed to write my own parser, as you do. So this tool I'm using here has the possibility to use this, but other new tools on the block, like Rust and so on, can do more or less the same. So it's just it's very how will I say, it's very it's very good that it's like more of this kind of tooling that we can use to make all this kind of guessing into the values of some obscure data, because this was just a hobby, right? This is just something, okay, I can help on this one, but we sometimes meet old or legacy systems that have a lot of stuff that we don't know. So maybe just by using this kind of techniques where we can guess some kind of patterns or some kind of information in this kind of toolings, and we can actually maybe, as I mentioned, we can get some kind of simplicity, and we can get some kind of correctness, what is actually here, and we can just stare into those values. And I think I also want to show like this one just for the fun of it. 6 types. Maybe just pass. So what the way I do this is just I took a chunk from this file, and what I did is I just in debug mode I just went for each of the bytes. I was guessing what this was, so I know this was a PID, like a player unique identifier. Then I found out, well, this is the name, this is the size of the string, this is the reverse byte with my algorithm. I know this string of hexadecimal is just cachito. Cachito is the name in uppercase, which is like the nickname of the player. Indexes, roles, citizenship, which is like some kind of identifier from the country. We have position, hair color, birthday. You can see he's one of those that had like the 1900. So now that I patched this game, I need to update his birthday as well, and then the height and so on and so forth. So I went slavically for only one instance per data element. And once you have this stuff represented in your parser combinator, you can just reuse this all the time. And I think this is pretty documenting. So we know that, well, the skin color, or maybe the hair color, well, the person is a blonde, a bald, a black hair, gray hair, and so on. And sometimes, because it's represented as a byte, it happens that, well, maybe they put in some kind of error on purpose, so you couldn't pass this one, and then you know that it was like, oh, invalid value. I didn't find any one of those, but I would really like to get this fail message whenever I was running this tool, and then I can just put in a placeholder that's just like unknown here. So let's go to the show. Yeah, so now it's actually done. It made all the player images, everything. So if I go in and say viewer, foot, is it no data? Yeah, so if we just go in and look into this is actually the brand for each team. So if we do like this, we can see that all these pictures have very low, bad quality, right? But this is necessary because I think there's 32 times 32. But this is what the game needs. And this, like the colors from this is actually patched already with this, palette scheme. But if we look into how the quality is actually with foot as a JSON, foot best clubs. Images maybe, yes. Oh, clubs, yes, this one. So we can see this is actually a way better quality, right? But all this logos or brands for the teams, this is not supported by like an old school game. So this is why we need to do this for all the brands of the clubs, but also like for the 10,000 players. And I mean, this is okay. It's cool that we do it with a paint, but I'd rather do this all automatically, right? So this is like the power if you combine like a JQ with curl, vget, and then the thing that you didn't, that you were not able to do with this kind of tooling. Well, you can just write your own applications for that. And I think... So did we see? No. Okay. So I just want to show you how to recursively copy from food data everything to the game football. So now, if you recall, if I run my own patch version, we shouldn't get more this goalkeeper that was 50 years old, right? We should get like another goalkeeper, and he probably shouldn't be older than 30 years old. So I think it was in Real Madrid, and we take this one. And now we can already see that the goalkeeper that I was shown before, he was actually from Spain, and he was 50 years old. And now we have a player from Belgium, and he's 25 years old. So now we actually have the update, and we can see this is the algorithm that Sebastian wrote. So none of those values actually exceed 99 anymore, because they actually bugged out the game. So this is more or less realistic, and if you go to the FIFA API, this value actually matches, and the picture actually removed like the background to make a better contrast between like the picture of the person, and also like I put like a black border, because this window here was white, and if I put like this contrast in white, it was blending too bad. But all this is stuff you can do in Magic. So you just say put a border and just make this alpha channel white, just remove it and put in a black a white color. So all this can just be scripted, right? And then just run it. So it took like 2-3 minutes to do like the first division, and if I run everything, it's just take 15 minutes. And if I have to download, if it was possible to download over the data again, all this process would take less than 30 minutes, which is way better than 480 manpower days to update the game. I mean, if it was one person that had to update it, like every year, all these teams change players. So once you not done everything you have done, it was just a waste of time, because you have to start over again, right? So I hope this could help out. But now we have this situation that we need to find another API. There's actually a German service, and I tried to reach out to them, but I haven't heard back from them. So the thing about this service, the German service, is that you need to register yourself, and then you need to get a premium account. And I can already hear that premium account means they have to pay some stuff. And but let's see how it ends up. So my home point of this is that some of these tools that we use, and I'm not a guy who usually go into this stuff, because when I talk with people at this BornHack, where they're used to do more or less some kind of stuff like this, and they just say, well, why don't you use like a debugger? Why don't you just disassemble it? Why don't you just do this and that? But I just thought, can I, just for the fun of it, hey, I had to do something under the COVID times, right? So can I just look into bytes, and can I just see information? Can I just get patterns out of this? And am I able to represent those patterns, those findings that I see in a structured way, so I can actually reuse this logic? Can I do some, well, it's not this one, but it's this one or this one, or this one or this one. Is there a way that I can do this? And languages or like tools like this is actually something that allows this one. And as I say, I'm not using Rust, but Rust is one of the languages that can do this as well. And I think this was my last slide. So if anybody has any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you just modify the game to switch the calendar date without modifying the game files, how does the game respond to a 50-year-old goalkeeper?
So what happened is that every year it decides if somebody is above 33 or 35, they actually say that the player needs to retire. So at some point you will have all players retiring, because everybody's above 50, right? So you can still play with it, and I mean, it's a bit buggy algorithm, because I would expect if I play against people being 50, right, and you have players being 20, I think they will actually do what Bayern München did yesterday to Barcelona, right? But the thing is, sometimes you even lose to people being 50. And when I had like this bug with the 1900, there was actually people being 120 years, 130 years, beating youngsters, right? So So maybe like this notion of age, if it's not done correctly, it's still not going to break the game, but it doesn't give sense to have players that old. More questions? No, I think that's it.